Greetings all, and welcome to Esoteric Babble. Today, we're going to continue looking into how to apply the teachings of the Buddha. So after having made metta, loving kindness, a centerpiece and foundation of our day-to-day existence, we might ask, where do we go next? Again, there's this vast array of teachings. What do we look into next? And I would say the best place to go after loving kindness. And by the way, we always want to keep loving kindness. We don't do loving kindness and then put it aside and move on. We are always going to have loving kindness. So I don't want to make this sound like that's something we ever step away from. But what do we start thinking about next? I would say that the best place is the middle path. And the middle path is a phrase you hear a lot talked about by Buddhists or sometimes by people who, you hear about it in Buddhism. And at the end of this, and I'm going to try to keep this video short, at the end, I'd like to talk about some things that the middle path is not. So the middle path, the teaching on the middle path, comes from the Dhammacakkappavattanasuttaṃ, or the sutta on setting the wheel of Dharma in motion. A little side esoteric note here is why this word Dharma wheel? Why the word wheel there? I would love to hear what you have to say, dear listener. I want to plant a small seed, one that might anger academics, or at least cause them to roll their eyes, and perhaps with good reason. The word for wheel in Pali is chakka. The Sanskrit equivalent is chakra. And in English, we might say chakra, or sometimes maybe even chakra, you'll hear. You probably know, dear listener, that the chakras are these energy, or these wheels of energy in the subtle body. And kind of an interesting thing here is that there is a path of liberation that makes the chakras a focal point and awakening or bringing them into balance and awakening an energy and bringing it up through the chakras to our crown chakra, the Sahasrara. So I just want to plant that little seed that in this one little word that it opens up into this other realm. So what is this middle path? At the beginning of this teaching, the Buddha mentions that, and I should say, by the way, that this is traditionally taken to be the Buddha's first public teaching. It's not the first realization he had, but this is the first teaching he gave. And what he tells us is that when you examine the way people lead their lives, you'll find, or will find, that there are two extremes. Some people indulge every sense pleasure, and some people deny the body everything. And the Buddha says that neither of these paths will lead to any good. And strictly speaking, the Buddha had in the past led both of these lives. He grew up very wealthy. Then he entered into the homeless life and embarked upon this very ascetic journey, which almost killed him. So when the Buddha finally became enlightened, he realized that it was not due to either one of those, but rather there was a middle path. And so let's just hear a little bit of what the Buddha has to say about this middle path. He says, it produces insight and knowledge, and it leads to calm, experiential knowledge, or gnosis, to enlightenment, to nirvana. So those are some pretty good, some pretty compelling reasons to perhaps take up the middle path. We are going to talk about what the middle path is in the next video, because that's actually what the Buddha does next. He spells out more in detail what this framework is. But I want to say just a couple of things. One thing is that if we don't walk down this path, or if we haven't arrived at enlightenment, we don't know if this middle path is going to work. So it would and will take some faith on our part to start this journey. We would have to sort of, on some level, think, yeah, it's possible, or I believe what the Buddha has to say here, I'll give it a shot. But whether, or I shouldn't say whether we believe it or not, but notice our belief really won't do anything other than that. It's not going to, by our belief, we're not going to experience these things that the Buddha just talked about. We will have to bring this to life. We will have to put it into practice. Now, the last thing I want to say is that the middle path sometimes is taken to be a sort of a position of maybe the Buddhas or of Buddhists. And so it kind of goes like this. Obviously, there are these two extremes, and the Buddha tells us to walk down the middle, take the middle path. And so some people take that to mean that, well, that means that that in any endeavor, we take the path of moderation. So here's a bad way to apply that. Some people never steal a thing in their lives. Some people steal everything. So I'll just go through life stealing a few things, or, I think that would be a bad way to read the middle path. And I think whenever we want to expand our knowledge of the middle path, or see if there are other ways we can understand it, and we should do that, we have to kind of go back to what this, we have to think about the teaching in its context. And I would say that it's a good way, I think, to understand the middle path is that we could think of ourselves as basically physical only, like maybe materialists do. We could think of ourselves as spiritual only, which certain religions and spiritual traditions would have us believe. The Buddha is telling us that we are both of these things. We are a nama rupang. We are a mind-body complex. So that's one way that I think that we could kind of go beyond just like the literal teaching here and kind of gain even another understanding or another level of understanding of the Buddha's overall teachings. But I sincerely would like to hear what you have to say on that, dear listener. And for now, peace.